With tactical precision and fearless resolve, do the Tome Keepers wage war on the enemies of the Imperium. They fight not just with sacred bolter and honored blade, but with the accumulated knowledge of eons etched in their minds, for they believe that only through truth and understanding can they finally defeat humanity's many foes. Every battle is meticulously planned, every foe tactically analyzed, and every ally carefully scrutinized to ensure that victory is achieved in the most efficient manner possible. Then, when the battle is won and the fallen counted, all is recorded once again, the better to serve the Tome Keepers in their next war. Such practices have served the Tome Keepers well, for they have endured almost 8 millennia of warfare, proving themselves time and again in the crucible of battle. Indeed, their strategic insights have proven invaluable against myriad alien races, most notably the Necrons, drastically shortening wars that the Administratum estimated could take years, if not decades, to prosecute. Yet their dogged determination to record everything and challenge previously unchallenged conventions has seen the chapter come into conflict with other organizations within the Imperium, organizations that believe the Adeptus Astartes should have complete faith in the Emperor and his servants, and far fewer questions. The Tome Keepers were founded in 546 M32 in the wake of the War of the Beast. The war against the Orcs had taken a huge toll on the Imperium's armies, and new Space Marine chapters were required to defend the Imperium from the galaxy's many threats. Gene seed was taken out of cryo-storage, and new samples received from all extant chapters. It was from the Ultramarines gene stock that Chapter 281, later to be known as the Tome Keepers, was born. As with most newly created chapters, officers and specialists were requisitioned from the parent chapter. Captain Kaelus Viata, formerly of the Ultramarines' Second Company, was elevated to the rank of chapter master, and he oversaw the creation and training of 400 battle brothers over the following 2 decades. Their training ground would be that of Dornak IV, a barren death world in the Segmentum Solar. The new aspirants were subjected to years of harsh physical training, psycho-indoctrination, genetic alteration, and painful surgical enhancements before they were ready to become warriors of the Adeptus Astartes. Several hundred passed the grueling. Many thousands did not. As Viata's forces came to battlefield readiness, the chapter's assets were also assigned. Battle barges and strike cruisers arrived from Farmer Crag, along with armored vehicles, aircraft, drop pods, dreadnought chassis, and 20 venerated suits of tactical dreadnought armor. Accompanying these war assets were thousands of chapter serfs, logisticians, tech savants, ship crews, Medicae personnel, fabricators, artisans, requisitioners, architects, servitors, and countless others. Supplies were accumulated from planetary tithes, ammunition was allocated, litanies were recited, and machine spirits were appeased. In the year 567 M32, Chapter 281 was declared ready to serve the Emperor. Assigned to watch over the Segmentum Pacificus and the warp routes towards Terra from the galactic west, the starships of the fledgling chapter headed for the Sol Mandeville Point and made the warp translation to the little-known Caracross sector without incident. The region of space was sparsely populated according to Imperial records, but teemed with alien life forms, from Eldari corsairs and Hrud infestations to marauding warbands of Orcs. Yet there was one planetary system, right at the heart of the Caracross sector, that they all seemed to avoid. It was in this system, designated GB 677, that the chapter decided to make its home. 4 of the system's 8 planets were inhabitable. They made planetfall on Istruma. What the Space Marines discovered when they landed was a world that had been forgotten by the Imperium, a mere footnote in a galaxy of 1 billion worlds. Yet the Istruman people welcomed the Space Marines with open arms, for they recognized them as the Sky Warriors of old and as great heroes of humanity. Viator and his retinue were treated as honored guests and led to Nivernais, the world's principal city, where they were received with dignity and awe by the Planetary Council. The Space Marines were told the long history of Istruma and how its people traveled from ancient Terra millennia ago, and they were shown many great artifacts wrought by the planet's artisans, and they were told of a great tragedy that had befallen the people of Istruma. Over thousands of years, their life expectancy had fallen drastically, and the planet's inhabitants rarely lived past the age of 30. Children became apprentices at a young age, working with members of their family in their chosen craft. Skills were taught quickly, and everything was chronicled in personal journals so that future generations could pick up where their forebears left off. The artifacts previously shown to Viata and his officers took on new meaning. They had not been crafted by a single person, but by scores of artisans over many short lifetimes. Yet the Istrumans did not begrudge their short lives, for they knew, as they explained to Viator and his men, that though their own books may close, their legends would live on through their words. Death, they said, was to be embraced, not feared. The Space Marines were taken beneath the city of Nivernais, where they bore witness to a vast library that was almost a city in its own right. Entire streets and thoroughfares were dedicated to millions upon millions of books, data slates and information terminals. Upon those shelves lay the history of eons. The contents of the library would shape the chapter's future for millennia to come. Viator believed that Istruma and its inhabitants had great promise. He saw that the people of Istruma were hardy and resourceful, and their accumulated knowledge was almost beyond comprehension. To the tactically minded Viator, the collection of strategic monographs in the library were reason enough to forge Istruma into a chapter planet. With the blessings of the Planetary Council, orbital landers descended from the clouds, and construction began on a vast chapter fortress atop the Zaatos Mountains at the planet's inhospitable northern pole. To honor the event, the Istrumans presented Viator with one of their greatest possessions, a stasis-sealed volume known as the White Book. Viator returned the honor in the naming of his chapter. The chapter and its warriors would henceforth be known as the Tome Keepers. Istruma proved to be a wise choice for the Tome Keepers' homeworld. The planetary system was rich with natural resources, and its 4 habitable planets provided a large number of recruits. Many families put their sons forward for the trial of pages in the hope that they would become sky warriors, thereby bringing great honor to their family name. The young hopefuls competed in trials of strength and endurance before being taken far into the Rad deserts to test their survival skills. They fought each other in specially constructed arenas, watched closely by the master of recruits. Many did not survive. As the surviving aspirants became neophytes, they began the organ implantation process required to become Space Marines. Yet when the 18th implant, the progenoid gland, was implanted, the chapter's apothecaries noticed that it had a curious psychological side effect. The previously short-lived Istrumans were now virtually immortal, now they had become Space Marines, and many struggled with the dichotomy, feeling they were being denied their rightful place among their departed ancestors. This feeling was echoed by many of the Istruman people, who began to see them not as the glorious warriors they imagined, but as pariahs. Some of the new Tome Keepers tended towards recklessness, seeing themselves as dead men walking, having already outlived their natural lifespans. Many more became sullen and introspective, yet within all of them was instilled a fearlessness of death and a mutual acceptance of mortality's impermanence that surpassed even that of their own people. With careful psycho-indoctrination, the new recruits learned to harness their grim resolve, yet something still rankled within them. Many used their few minutes of personal time each day to write journals, a persistent hangover from their former lives that the chaplains, later to be called orators, seemed unable to quell. As the neophytes became fully fledged battle brothers, they began to note down observations on their foes, devising new tactics and strategies for their destruction. Chapter Master Viator watched with interest. Though the Codex Astartes promoted adherence, it also encouraged innovation. Had not their Primarch Reboot Gilliman praised the pursuit and acquisition of knowledge? As the chapter grew to full fighting strength, Viator called for his battle brothers to embrace the traditions of Istruma. Battle brothers were encouraged to develop new skills and further their understanding of their myriad foes. Many books were written, and over the following millennia, many books were closed. Where other chapters may rely on aggression or overwhelming firepower to secure victory, the Tome Keepers place a heavy emphasis on clinical battlefield discipline, relying on superior tactics and an understanding of the enemy's capabilities. Alongside their everyday training, battle brothers are required to conduct in-depth studies on the enemies they will face, to analyze all of the Tome Keepers' major engagements, and to become proficient in the chapter's battle cant. With this knowledge, a battle brother will know what strategy is being employed, and his role within it in just a few short words. Each battle brother is also encouraged to keep a journal of his own battlefield observations and learnings, thereby furthering the knowledge of the chapter as a whole and enabling the constant development and employment of new tactics and strategies. The chapter cult places strong emphasis on the traditions of Istruma while upholding the teachings that science and reason should prevail over superstition and blind faith. As a whole, the chapter's warriors are scholars almost as much as soldiers. They are considered to be thoughtful, measured, and somewhat humanitarian by imperial standards, and will often put civilian lives before their own. The Tome Keepers have fought in many notable conflicts. Their honor rolls full of great victories. Countless worlds have been liberated and billions of lives saved by their selfless actions. Yet powerful enemies have also been made. The munitions world of 56 Kappa Munita was the scene for the first large-scale martial engagement of the Tome Keepers chapter in 228 M34. The planet sat just outside the predicted path of War Gobrok, which had already smashed through 2 subsectors. By conducting a series of fleet-based actions, the Tome Keepers were able to lure Gobrok's ramshackle starships towards 56 Kappa Munita, and then engage the orcs on the planet's surface. Though vastly outnumbered, the Tome Keepers fought only on their own terms, ambushing exposed columns, making fighting retreats and always occupying the higher ground. Growing ever more enraged at his evasive foe, Gobrok conducted an all-out attack on the planet's city-sized munitions storage facility into which he had seen the Tome Keepers retreat. It was exactly what the Tome Keepers expected. Having already evacuated the facility's workers, they detonated the explosives they'd planted and blew Gobrok and the majority of his war to pieces. In 291 M37, the ecclesiarchal world of Sanctimonia was overrun by the forces of chaos. Within months, the entire sector was ablaze with the taint of chaos. The Tome Keepers responded to the astropathic pleas for help and, along with a Black Templars crusade, 2 convents of Adepta Sororitas, and 8 Astra Militarum regiments, began a campaign of cleansing the fallen worlds. The first signs of discord amongst the allied force occurred on the hive world of Gleb, when Canoness Sophira, a vehement witch-hater from the Order of the Argent Shroud, balked at the presence of Chief Librarian Eshu and his retinue of librarians. Her distrust of the Psychers led to a much higher casualty rate than expected, particularly when telepathic communications from Eshu were ignored by the ecclesiarchal forces. Less than a year later, on the shrine world of Bespax, the Tome Keepers under the command of Captain Saduk were forced to destroy the Mausoleum Divinito, a vast crypt containing the bodies of over 300 imperial martyrs, when a warp portal was opened inside it by a conclave of demagogues. Incensed by the unholy act of desecration, the Ministorum were further enraged when Saduk pointed out that the entombed had already been martyred once and that a second time would do them no further harm. On the civilized world of Happenstance, the Tome Keepers were to join 3 Defon regiments in a combined assault on a heretic-held city. The Astra Militarum, who were accompanied by Simonius Falk, Cardinal Palatine of Sanctimonia, were to engage the enemy defences, while the Tome Keepers conducted a drop-pod assault on their command position. When the city came in sight, however, Falk ordered the Astra Militarum to advance immediately and slaughter the enemy in the Emperor's name. He disregarded the battle plan devised by the Tome Keepers, deeming their prudence and caution to be a lack of faith in the Emperor's protection and divine guidance. The Defon were almost wiped out as they launched their attack, and the Tome Keepers were forced to abort their own mission to extract them. The Tome Keepers decried Falk's disregard for human life. In turn, Falk accused them of dereliction of duty. The final blow came when the Tome Keepers joined the assault on Sanctimonia. As they assailed the Holy Capital, the Black Templars and Adepta Sororitas made no distinction between heretic forces and civilians, deeming that a decade on a chaos-held world would be enough to taint even the strongest minds. Though their actions proved to be prudent in the aftermath, the Tome Keepers would not forgive their allies for what they saw as wanton butchery and the slaughter of potential innocents. The Tome Keepers departed Sanctimonia on difficult terms with both the Black Templars and the Ecclesiarchy. In 748 M41, the astropathic choir on Istruma received a scrambled message from the Adeptus Mechanicus mining world of Salax on the outskirts of the Hiraki Deeps. Suspecting an orc invasion, a Tome Keepers task force arrived at Salax only to find the entire planet scoured of human life. More troubling was that there were no telltale signs of orc activity. Making planetfall near the mining facility, the Tome Keepers discovered signs of battle, but none like they had ever recorded before. Whole segments of the research station appeared to have been shorn off, the bare metal shining in the sun. Discarded tools, weapons and equipment lay everywhere, neatly bisected. Of the tech priests, there was no sign. As chapter serfs began documenting the scene, Captain Ilunai led the task force into the heart of the mountain beneath the facility. As they approached the bottom of the access tunnels, a swarm of metallic creatures burst from the darkness to engulf the Space Marines. They were soon joined by far larger constructs that materialized through solid rock, their bladed limbs slicing easily through the power armor of Ilunai's troops. Despite the sudden assault, the Tome Keepers dispatched their foes and pushed on into the tunnel. What they found inside was not a series of caverns, but a Necron tomb complex, the walls lined with row upon row of stasis crypts. Necron immortals were the first to awaken. Facing an unknown enemy, Ilunai shouted Third Hefax over the Vox, a battle cant that every Tome Keeper present knew by rote. As the tactical Marines advanced fearlessly towards the enemy, bolters blazing, the company's assault Marines skirted the flanks to come upon the enemy from behind. Chainblades screamed and shuddered as they smashed into the metal warriors, while power weapons sliced through the Necrons far more easily. As Ilunai joined the fighting, his devastators planted melter bombs around the complex before leading the retreat. The Tome Keepers fell back to the surface in good order as the Necron complex detonated, and so did the Tome Keepers record their first engagement with the Necrons of the Thoct dynasty, the beginning of a war that would last over 200 years. The dying years of the 41st millennium were a trying time for the Tome Keepers. 2 centuries of war with the Thoct dynasty had already taken their toll on the chapter when the Great Rift sundered the galaxy. The chapter, reduced to just over 200 battle brothers, was facing annihilation. Yet salvation came in the most unlikely of forms. The Primarch Roboute Guilliman was reborn, and in his wake came the Primaris Space Marines, a new hope against the encroaching darkness. The Tome Keepers, for so long vilified by the Adeptus Ministorum and shunned by other imperial organizations as a result, suddenly found their ranks bolstered. Too many books had been closed over the course of the last 2 centuries. Now many new ones were being opened. tests.